this because I am tired of his mouth. And I was like, yeah, sure. But later on at lunch is like where they get to just kind of say whatever they want without structure, you know. He came over to me and he asked a few more questions, and he was like, and I could tell, like, while I was going through the rest of the stuff, he was just like mulling stuff over. And he got, I mean, my blood pressure was high, and I was doing all the defensive postures. I was like, but I was still making sure that he had the space to say what he needed to say. By the end, he said in front of the group, thank you. Thank you for helping me see myself, but more importantly, thank you for helping me see our foster son. And that's the point. Like, you don't even have to say thank you, just go home and love on that kid, right? And so, the other guy was basically, I'm only here to get my hours because I have to get hours for being a foster parent. And by the end, he was like, I live in a small town. He lives in New Pal. He was like, I live in a small town. I'm a black man in New Palestine. So all of this stuff you talk about is not something that I talk about. I'm surviving in New Pal. I was like, oh, I get that. I don't drive through New Pal. So you live there, I get it. But both of them said that they were different because they were heard, because I didn't shut them down, because I didn't tell them they were wrong, because I didn't say all the things I was feeling. I just let them be seen and be heard. And it was very challenging because that's not where I am, and I'm a protector by nature, so somebody messes with my people, I'm ready to throw bows, like, let's do this. And I had to come out of myself in order to be able to let them be themselves, but on the other side of that, it ended up being effective for these.
So the meetups have only been happening for about a year, and I remember one that we had at Mojo's, actually. It was in the spring, I believe, and I had kind of an odd conversation. So the circles in Indianapolis are very small, and when you do this kind of work, you just know people. And so I got a strange message from a friend of mine saying, like, hey, there's somebody coming to tonight's meetup that might give you some trouble, just FYI. And I'm like, okay. So, and I didn't think anything of it, like I did, but just, anyway, just going into the space and doing it anyway. And this particular individual is a friend of mine, and we get few, because I think that the group is called She Hive, like the meetups are gender neutral, and I make sure that we communicate that as clearly as we can, but just, it comes with a name, so we get primarily cisgender women, like that's just what it is. And this particular individual is a cisgender heterosexual man, and he showed up and like announced to us, like in conversation, that he was there to show us women that like we need some opposition. So basically trying to like be the devil's advocate, like in the conversation, as if the devil needs one for one. And so I was really caught off guard by that. And throughout the conversation, just kind of doing like little very microaggressive things throughout, and trying to give him space to, of course, speak his mind, because that's the entire point, is to have those challenging discussions. But the issue was that he was making people feel unsafe, and I pride myself on creating safe spaces, and that's the entire point of the organization itself. And so as the facilitator of the conversation, and having so many people who knew this individual and didn't know how to approach the situation in the conversation itself, taking a few minutes, like every time he would say something, I would ask a question that would not necessarily kind of come at him like I really wanted to. I really wanted to. Especially, we've had like tough conversations, he and I, before. But in that space, it just wasn't that kind of energy. But asking him questions to get him to reflect on what he was actually saying, like hear what you were actually saying, and maybe you might think about things a little bit differently, was kind of my approach. Now, other people in the circle, and this is very interesting in working in a space that we establish safe space and introduce ourselves and all those things, but it's different folks every single time. And so every single time we meet, it's a different kind of dynamic. And the folks that are participating are also kind of helping facilitate the conversation in some ways. And this particular incident, it was as if kind of like maybe 3 or 4 of us, including myself, like challenging this particular individual. And it wasn't in a way that I think could be perceived as an attack. I could see, maybe if I were on the outside looking in, perhaps, but trying to take it into account, like tone and language and all those different things that factor into how we interact with one another, and keeping in mind that that you also have to give people who feel unsafe space to